Hello and welcome to another episode of Latitude. And in this episode, we're looking at, to my mind, a relatively unique initiative on the part of India's National Security Advisor, Mr. Ajit Doval, who has made a visit to Washington and Moscow with a short visit to London also thrown in to engage with his counterparts in those countries and essentially provide us some clues about how India is looking at its engagement with the big powers in the coming years and what are the areas of India's priorities. And we have with us an insider in many ways, but now happily retired, Mr. Shekhar Dutt, former Defense Secretary of India, former Deputy National Security Advisor, and a former governor, and somebody who is a keen participant in the intellectual ongoings, events, seminars, conferences from time to time in Delhi. So we're very glad to have you, sir, on our show, and I'm delighted. And also the fact that you're a veteran of the 1971 war, having been an Indian Army officer, you will be able to explain to us a number of things that remain foggy for a lot of observers. So the first question that I want to ask you, that Mr. Doval's trip of this nature, is this unique or is this traditional that the national security advisors make trips to all the key countries that we have engagements with and our partners, and in one go, killing many birds with the same stone? Washington, he's got a number of arrangements in place. Moscow, he even interacted in a long 55-minute session with President Putin. And of course, his engagement in London, where I believe Prime Minister Rishi Sunak dropped in to show his interest in Indo-British relations. Your views, sir?
So I think it is quite a unique event because one after another, Mr. Doval used his time, and in fact, in a very short trip, managed to meet maximum numbers of people who could be called his counterpart, who could be called assets of the other governments. And he had not only discussions, but also he could convey the feelings of his personally as well as of our country, which is a very, very important face which he has to present, because National Security Advisor, as you know, is the national security. He is the person who is responsible for the entire bandwidth of our national security. And similarly, he met his counterparts in USA, in UK, and of course, in Moscow, he met not only his counterpart, but also President Putin for a long duration, which is...
Yes, sir. Indeed. I'll come to that. In fact, he also met so many others from Central Asian countries. So it is really a wide sweep. When knowing Mr. Doval, who's very focused, and my chances to have interacted with him, I find he's very much got his eyes on the ball, and he's very much clearly focused on a number of large issues. And that's my next question to you, sir. That, they did an agreement of sorts in the US for India and the US to engage more with critical and emerging technologies. And two areas which have caught my attention. One is that it's more or less certain now that General Electric will be providing us the engines to produce more aircrafts, fighter aircrafts, at a time when India is having and hosting the largest air show in Asia. And so this is another shot in the arm for India's defense indigenous infrastructure initiative. And the second one that I'll broach with you a little later is about the agreement to try and become another partner of the US for producing semiconductors. But first, the defense and critical technology agreements. Your view, sir?
Yeah, he held these dialogues with his counterparts as well as other important people and one part of this major discussion was initiative on critical and emerging technologies, in short, ICET. Now, they're very important, and they actually are the heart of various equipment. Like aircraft has engines, and engines have a tremendous role, both in terms of civil engines or fighter and helicopter engines. And India uh, going on to become a major it is already a major user of engines, major user of the aircraft. But manufacturing engine has to be in India's big priorities, and this ICET would allow India a partner with the other country. Now, with GE, they have a very big presence, and they have been having this presence in Bangalore and in India. And therefore, it is naturally a good sort of initiative to have a conference or discussion with the GE in the ambit of the ICET. And I think it will be of great use because, as you know, GE has even our LCA, light combat aircraft, Tejas, it has GE engines, and
Yes.
so we should manufacture GE engines. And similarly, many of our civil aviation also have GE engines. We should have the ability to do MRO as well as repair, maintain, as well as manufacture. So I
Okay.
think it was a very good step. And Mr. Doval put all this together because that is the main aim of his being there under the aegis of Indo-American talks.
Right. So, no, clearly, I have found in a number of initiatives that the messaging that comes out with the initiatives on the part of the National Security Council led by Mr. Doval, and you were earlier part of the NSA's team, or the earlier NSA's team, you know how much background work that goes into and the homework that goes into ensuring that in the time that these meetings take place, everything, the files are prepared with such a lot of detail that everything falls into place, at least in India's interests. And so would the other powers like to believe it's serving their interests also. So there are one or two other things that came out of his visit. One was that ISRO would begin to work with NASA. And that is another big breakthrough because all of us have grown up knowing that NASA was the pioneer space agency of the US, if not the world. And therefore, what benefits we can get out of that, I'd like you to explain. Likewise, America deciding to make India a partner in its semiconductor initiatives, more so when they have put a whole lot of sanctions on China and China is scrambling for more and more. And as we know, semiconductors is really the heart of futuristic technologies.
You see, space is a panorama of a huge numbers of collaboration. And it's not just the delivery vehicle or the rocket, like GSLV, PSLV, and all that, global or polar satellite launching vehicles. It is also huge numbers. In fact, which runs into thousands of small part, and everything has to be accurate. There has to be absolutely no chance of zero of any inaccuracy. And a good GSLV or a PSLV is almost 22-story building. It's that height, large thing. And you must have seen the various wires which come out of its sides and get inside the building. It is basically the monitoring is being done all the time till the time it is launched, so that every bit of it, every component is working at the right.
Yeah, and what about semiconductors, sir?
Now India has also taken another initiative and formed ISPA, that is Indian Space Association, and I am the chief mentor of that. So it's a an effort to bring in private sector more in the space. That means these many of these initiatives would be passed on to the private sector, who would then be manufacturing their parts and components. And all these would be assembled by the ISRO and to make a big launching project. So therefore, it is absolutely necessary that Indian organization, both public sectors as well as private sectors, work with the greatest of the efficiency and the littlest uh, of the of the errors. Should be no
Okay.
possibility of any errors. Now, the other thing that you were talking about, the semiconductor, what has happened is that we require, and semiconductors, as you know, or the chips are basically not only the heart but also the mind of the this thing. This is a mobile, and it functions because of the chip placed in it. Every car that you have, it has a carburetor, but it functions because there is a chip in that. And therefore, practically in every equipment, you have a chip, and the chip has basically, it can be ASIC, that is a number of chips put together, but the chip basically has all the different elements which control that system. So without chip, no control can be done.
Okay. So clearly, I mean, you've explained all these issues, and we all know the importance of semiconductors in our lives now, and not just in defense and national security efforts, but everything. I mean, even car engines or modern cars get stranded if the semiconductor-related chip begins to misbehave. But more after a break, to look at the other visits of Mr. Doval, particularly Moscow and Russia, where I'm sure America would have watched very carefully what emerges of that relationship of India. But that after a break. Welcome once again. We are looking at our views that we are getting from an old hand in the national security establishment, governor formerly, and also deputy national security advisor and former defense secretary of India, Mr. Shekhar Dutt, also a war veteran. And he is explaining to us the meanings and the outcomes of Mr. Doval's visits to important world capitals, and something which is quite unique. At least I cannot remember of this scale being enacted by any predecessor of his. So, Mr. Shekhar Dutt, sir, I want you to explain to us primarily what really was different in his engagement with Russia. He went to Moscow after a stopover in London, but we'll briefly touch on that in the end, because I think that was more a courtesy visit, but I don't see any major breakthroughs coming out with the UK right now. But certainly with Russia, and there were two areas in which there was this conference on Afghanistan that he attended, and that conference was clearly meant to interact with a number of countries that have a serious interest in Afghanistan, and why Afghanistan should not be abandoned, because Afghanistan is still home to a number of irregular outfits and terrorist groups. Your view, sir?
Yes, this was unique in that way that he followed his US visit with a brief visit to Britain, and then, and in that period, it wasn't that he was idle. He talked with a lot of people, including the British Prime Minister, and then he came to Moscow. Now, one would say that, well, is it India's benefit that we are able to speak to so many people at the same whim, or is it something which people hold it against us. I think every country wants information and wants from the heart and the mind of the people who lead that country. So NSA coming to UK was indeed something which was NSA of India coming to UK was indeed something which they looked forward, and in the brief spell they made all their possibility to include as many people as they can or they could have to discuss with Mr. Doval. Similarly, when he went to Moscow, he not only discussed with his counterpart, but also he was pretty much on board with Mr. Putin. Now, these kind of occasions are something which the countries look forward because they want to know exactly what is the view of India. And if and the Indians also at the same time put forward their views that this is something which is beneficial for everybody. This is going to create a problem. This is certainly not desirable, and things like that. So your discussion is fairly.
So let me take you focused onto his meeting with Mr. Putin. I thought that was quite unique. That the president of Russia, at this point of time, when the country is very much in the global news, embroiled in a full-fledged war in Ukraine, would spare almost 1 hour to engage one-on-one with Mr. Doval. I think the room was cleared of the representatives of other countries, and Mr. Putin and Mr. Doval were able to reassess the importance of Russia and India relations. More so now that Russia and India relations have moved away from being only defense and space focused to even energy and import-export focus. Your views, sir?
Yes, this is pretty unique. And also you must understand that Mr. Putin himself is a pretty unique person. I mean, he can speak in English, he can understand. Sometimes he doesn't even have the necessity of an interpreter. In fact, I have also have had meetings with Mr. Putin and without any interpreters. He speaks English.
Right. Oh, interesting.
So that is one. And secondly, he doesn't require any aids to talk. So it is far more easier for a person to sit and ask questions and get answers, and then understand the difficulty of the other person to yield. Now, Mr. Putin has certainly a requirement of India being on board because, and this is recognized by the US also, because USA always knew that India, although dealing with Russia, is not in the Russian camp. It is not in the European camp. India is India. And therefore, US also has had a view that you have to deal with India as India. And so therefore, and the US would know also that Mr. Doval is going. Like Putin would know that that Mr. Doval is coming to USA. So nothing is sort of kept under the table.
Right. Now, so I want to, because of time limitations, I have to cut in. Apologies. What is the message that goes out to the greater watchers in the international community about India's engagement with Russia and US, and how India would like to use both these relationships to navigate the choppy waters of world affairs? More so when increasingly there is a view that is being formed, as you said, India is not in America or Russia camp. So is India going to be a classic swing state?
Yes, and India has a view, and India's view is understood also primarily because they have seen India coming up and more. But one thing is sure, that and which Mr. Doval had to rub it in well, that terrorism is the national objective of many countries. So here in a situation, 21st century, second, third decade, and you still have countries sponsoring terrorists countries making
Very true.
available funds for so taking Russia and the USA on board, taking UK on board of this, and then sort of saying that they have to do certain things, which is very clear and which is clearly visible to ensure that terrorism doesn't remain in the as a kind of a national objective of some countries.
Oh, no, that was clearly a slant on Pakistan
Yes.
without naming them. But just your last view, sir, and before we need to wrap up, why is there a reluctance on the part of the Indian establishment to name and shame Pakistan?
Actually, the idea is that the state is there for good of the people. Now it is some people of the state,
The deep state.
yeah, the deep state, or you can say the manipulators who use this,
Yes.
and this has to be understood. So we have to match our information with the others' information. There should be collaboration to sort of nab and don't allow terrorism to grow through this kind of
Okay. No, I think that is one of the clearer definitions I've had in many years about why don't we name and shame Pakistan. But hope to have you and interact with you again, sir. Thank you very much for your wisdom and your time. And thanks to everybody for watching. Until our next episode, goodbye.